Amy Adams.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It's a great pleasure to stand here and take a call on the second reading of the Electoral Finance and Advance Voting Amendment Bill. And I actually just want to start my contribution this afternoon, sir, by thanking the Minister for the way he's approached bringing this bill to the House, which is in such sharp contrast to the previous iteration of electoral finance reform in this House. And I think the long, deliberative, consultative process and the overarching desire to ensure that the solution we would come to as a Parliament would be an enduring one, I think is something that is worthy of this House's support, and I certainly want to congratulate the Minister for that. Can I also just take a moment to thank my fellow members of the Electoral Legislation Committee. In Parliament here we tend to get fairly political on many occasions, but I think actually that this is a committee that approached this matter in that same sense of needing to reach a sensible and enduring solution. And I'd like to comment that I think every party that was represented on that committee, and in fact that was every party in the House, worked very constructively and collaboratively, and I think can take some credit for the state of the legislation that we've now brought back to Parliament. Finally, I just want to, in this introduction, congratulate and thank the officials and the committee staff, because we were not always an easy committee to work with, and they certainly were excellent in their support to the committee, and the state of the bill as it is now in front of this House is in large part due to their work, of course. There's a lot in this bill, and there's a lot that you could take a contribution in this House on, and I'm mindful of not taking up too much time. And the points that I want to talk on just very briefly in this contribution, and there will obviously be more time in the committee stages to go into them, are firstly the regulated period, secondly the electoral spending issue, and thirdly I just want to touch on the issue of spending caps. The regulated period is one that we did spend quite a bit of time discussing, and the tensions that we were really balancing there were the need to ensure that no one in this House was faced with a position of being in a regulated period without realising it. And that need to avoid retrospectivity was certainly one of the driving factors for our committee. Equally, we wanted to get as close as possible to a situation where the regulated period was going to be around 3 months, without acting to curtail the Prime Minister's discretion in calling election dates. So it was certainly my view that sort of change to how the elections are called and when, and discretion around that, was a major constitutional change, best left for another forum. So in this instance, we didn't want the regulated period to wag the dog of how our whole elections are called, but we certainly did want to come to a situation where, more often than not, the regulated period was around the 3 months that we were all very comfortable with. And I think that the default trigger of 2 years, 9 months from the previous election, and the other triggers that are built into the legislation is a pretty good compromise of the issues we were dealing with. Can I just touch briefly on this issue of election spending? Here again it's a matter of balance, and it's a balance between making sure candidates for Parliament can adequately communicate with their voters. And coming from a large rural electorate myself, I know very well that it's very difficult to get out and communicate who you are and what you stand for in an electorate of that size within the spending cap as it was. So certainly we were mindful of the need to make sure that limit allowed a meaningful discussion with voters, but obviously recognising that you didn't want it to be a contest of he with the biggest pockets won, or she. And we've raised the limit up to 25,000, as the previous speakers have indicated. Arguably it could have gone higher, but that's where we got to with the support of the House. And equally we have, as Ms Dalziel commented on her speech, and at long last, got rid of this vexatious issue of second-hand timber. And I know there'll be many campaign committees around the country who are very pleased not to have to count nails anymore and worry about whether they can reuse last time's timber and how that would be costed. It was a nonsense, sir. It was a waste of everyone's time, and it's certainly very good to be rid of that. The other point I think that's just worth making in that context is that those figures, along with the spending cap figures, will now be CPI linked, ensuring we do not once more end up in a situation where you have a figure frozen in time, which gets less and less relevant as time goes on. Very briefly then, to finish, can I just touch on this issue of spending caps? You've heard from both the Minister and previous speakers that this is a compromise position where all parties can feel that we have a workable and enduring solution. Our starting position obviously was not to have one, and my own view, and I'm quite happy to go on record saying it, is I think the limit could have been and potentially should have been higher. But what we had to do here was balance the need and the entitlement of every New Zealander to meaningfully engage in the election process with ensuring we didn't get a situation where big money players could come in, and as I don't think we've really seen in New Zealand to date, but certainly in America and other jurisdictions, and ensuring that there was some sort of limit across the board. Every other player in election spending is limited. Candidates are limited on what they can spend, parties are limited on what they can spend, and it's only right, sir, to my mind, in that sense, that anyone who wants to play in that park should also have some controls on them. Finally, can I just touch on the Parliamentary Services Amendment, which we're also debating as part of the second reading, and can I just reflect what the Minister has said of the importance of ensuring that there is absolutely no basis on which taxpayer funds can now be used on electioneering activities, as we saw with the pledge card. That, sir, can never be allowed to happen again, and with these changes it won't. I commend the bills to the House.
Mr. Speaker.